Einen schönen guten Morgen
Good morning to everybody here in the room at the Innovation Lab. And we are live at this Central Railway Station. I'd like to welcome all the journalists here in the room. And I also would like to welcome you who are watching us at the monitors. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to welcome our speakers, our CFO, Mrs. Waldner, and our CEO, Mr. Maté. And the two will present to you the balance sheet, the results for 2024, and will also give you an outlook for 2025. The presentation will be about 35 minutes, and then our two speakers will be at your disposal for questions. And please just raise your hands, and we will bring you then a microphone, and you can then ask the questions. And if you are watching at a monitor, then right below the screen, you have a field where you can enter your question. And I will then ask the questions on your behalf if you send them as a chat. So I'm Mr. Thier, I'm the speaker of the company, and I would like to moderate this session and take you through this hour. Mr. Maté, it's yours, the floor. Thank you very much. I think the social media certainly need to be applied as well. And also a cordial welcome from my side, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for having come here to the Central Railway Station, and thank you also for joining us electronically for our traditional press conference on the business report. Now, 2024 certainly was a very challenging year. The economic downturn took some of the wind out of our sails, and is continuing to do so, of course, and the inundations, the flood, they swept over us. But nevertheless, although this was a one-time-in-a-century flood, is accompanied by a one-time-in-a-century record, namely the passenger volume, and we can see that passengers continue to enjoy traveling by train, and we reached the mark of 500,000 million passengers, and I think this is the very impressive figure, namely 511 million passengers, and this means that every day 1.4 million passengers ride on a train every day, and basically that's as many people that view and watch the news report on television every evening. So compared to 2023, we were able to increase this value once again by 17 million passengers. That is about 4%. And from my point of view, what is important about this fact is that we set ourselves this goal for 2030, and actually we reached that target 6 years earlier, and I think that's a very good success. 300 million passengers riding our trains and 200 million passengers riding our buses. So we can see here that public transport is making a major contribution to transport in general, but also to the transition that we are going through in transport. Of course, it was the local transport where we had the big plus. You see here 10% compared to 2023. So for the first time, this is a major rise, and we take it and explain that by the fact that perhaps remote working has decreased a little bit. But on the other hand, we also see that people go on excursions much more, using trains, going on hiking tours, and our offer of trains and scheduled trains has been expanded, and we have 4.3 million kilometers of routes that we are offering. And now, long-distance transportation or traffic, this has remained more or less stable with 46 million kilometers of routes. And here, international long-distance traffic increased, whereas domestic long-distance traffic went down to some extent. This is mainly due to the fact that many of the routes are along the western route, and there was, of course, the flood. And if you then look over the longer period, that is to say 2019, the year before the COVID pandemic, then here we had an increase of more than 20% in long-distance traffic. And I think that in spite of Corona, it was possible to succeed and working with consistency to regain the passenger volume. But we did not only grow in organic terms, but in 24, we also had some acquisitions. We bought Averio, a company with local traffic in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, and here another 41 million passengers were entered and integrated into our figures. So altogether, we have now 552 million passengers riding ÖBB trains.
Der Güterverkehr.
Now, what about the cargo traffic? Definitely, it was a difficult year for cargo traffic, 2024, because the economic environment was quite challenging. I don't think I need to go into detail about that here in this group. And I would say that the economic environment continues to be very difficult. Industry is suffering from energy prices. Here we have decreases in chemistry, steel, paper. And here we see some downturns. Nevertheless, and you can see it also in the chart, rail cargo succeeded in increasing sales by 3%, and the volume of cargo deliveries went up by 5%. So, also on a European scale, we were quite successful in maintaining our position. Now, Mrs. Waldner will give us details about the figures. It will show us that these increases found also their way down into the very last and final lines of our balance sheet. Because there were also difficulties because of the rain. The outlook for the next 3 years, for 25, 26, and 27, certainly is not so rosy, to put it in these terms, because after all, the economic outlook is not so good, especially the manufacturing industry is not so well off. So what we can see here that is also that certain lines will be closed in Germany for the refurbishment. And then the Tower tunnel needs to be refurbished and needs to be closed. So if there has to be a deviation of the traffic, this, of course, increases costs. And these costs are not refunded by passengers. But also, in addition to organic changes in the cargo traffic, we also have anorganic traffic, so to say. In the Netherlands, we bought a company, a cargo company, and integrated that. So we have now cargo facilities from the North Sea, from the Netherlands, all the way down to the Black Sea. And this means that these routes also include, of course, Austria. And here we can make sure that there is a high quality along these routes. So Kapweg in the Netherlands, which means that we can cover and include the Netherlands and Belgium as well. And then in Serbia, a haulier company, here we entered into a cooperation, a joint venture with a Serbian company so that we can offer logistics services. So we're therefore in 14 countries altogether with our own traction, and in 18 countries we have representatives. And with that, I would like to move on to the foundation of a successful business company. It's our infrastructure. And this year, 173 million train kilometers. This scored a new record this year. I could say, or I merely want to say that the companies enjoy working with our infrastructure. There are so many different rail companies using our infrastructure, and since we now also have the infrastructure of the Graz-Köfler railway line, another 107-kilometer network, we also have a growth. So we have a record concerning passengers, but also concerning the usage of our network, of our train network. And here I can say that we not only have a record concerning passengers, but also concerning the investments. 3.2 billion could be invested, and that is an amount like never before. And of course, we want to modernize further our system, and that's a good basis for our system and for our operations in Austria. So never before in the history of the railways have there been so many trains on Austria's tracks, and never before have there been so many passengers on trains. And this makes Austria once again the train country #1 in the EU, and in no other country are there that many people riding the railways as in Austria, and this makes us and makes me in particular very proud. And to put you this into perspective, generally speaking, concerning the network usage, we hold place 3 behind Denmark and the Netherlands, 2 countries that you can easily imagine concerning topography, and then Austria is 3rd. So you see that our infrastructure is really being used very extensively. And of course, there's another record which I would like to mention. And I think that is a central issue, namely our staff, our employees, and our personnel level. Here again, we are steering towards a record. Last year, some 6,200 new staff members were hired, and through the acquisition of Averio, another 1,000 staff members were included in our figures. So by the end of 2024, we had 47,484 staff members in the ÖBB group. And that's a growth compared to 2023 by 2,443 people, or in percentages, it is a plus of 5.4%. So this is a figure that we had never before. So in 2024, we hired so many as never before. But this is not really a record in that sense, because when I joined ÖBB, there were some 70,000, but now we have less than half of that, considering the infrastructure. Nevertheless, those 47,000 people working for us, with that, we are the 12th largest employer here in this country. And I think that's the 5th largest employer in this country. And that's also quite an achievement. But of course, there is a great demand. There are 2 sources for that. On the one hand, we are expanding our operations. And on the other hand, we are undergoing a change in generations. The boom year generations is retiring, so every year some 4,000 to 5,000 new persons have to be hired. We're looking for that on the labor market, and we're quite successful in finding them. You know that our slogan is work for the ÖBB is cool, and if you know something, then you can join the ÖBB. And this becomes manifest in the applications. We had 120,000 applications last year for the various jobs at the ÖBB. So you can see here that the demand for our jobs is quite considerable, and we can here really select the best of the best. That can be for the locomotive drivers, for the dispatchers, for technical maintenance, apprentices, and here we put a lot of emphasis on apprentices. We had 73 apprentices more than in 2023, and in the meantime, we have some 2,000 young people who are undergoing their apprenticeship training, basically in some technical professions or occupations, and some also in commercial occupations. That's our future. But with that, we are also serving our social responsibility. We are giving young people some training. We are giving them a future. And with that, I would like to move on to our total results. We have 114 million as a result for 2024, quite stable, more or less the same as in 2023 in spite of the flood. And you can see here in the shaded section, this is the flood. So in spite of an economic downturn, in spite of the flood, in spite of the closed routes, etc., nevertheless, we had a very stable result that we could achieve. And I think this is quite remarkable. And what are the details? This is my colleague, Mrs. Waldner, will tell you that. Well, thank you, Andreas. I can only underline what you just said before. Yes, 2024 was quite challenging for the ÖBB as a whole. And all the more, we are very proud for what we achieved with our operations, and also that in spite of all the economic downturn and the flood, we had a stable result of 140 million euros, a little more than in the year before, and that in spite of all the challenges. And I will show you now how the individual subgroups were specifically affected by all these factors, and what they actually generated is what I would like to show you in these on these charts. Here you see the results. It's the usual presentation. You know that from last year. You see here the results for the individual subgroups before taxes, and you can see here, and in the shaded part, you can see here how much the subgroups were also affected. As far as passengers are concerned, here 2024 was a year with light and with shade. The light came from the record in passenger numbers because of the expansion of the routes offering, and this increased our sales. But the flood had an impact, and this caused major problems for passenger traffic because the route to the west had to be closed, and the route to the west is the one that is the most important one, I should say, a very important vital artery of our network, and that western route had to be closed, and therefore many trains could not run on these lines, and this is why our sales went down. And on top of that, a flood also causes additional problems. Just imagine, normally we have a schedule for the whole year, and we have all the trains scheduled accordingly, and for that you need some pre-work and also some post-work, and you have some briefing and debriefing. And if you then have a flood, if that comes down from the heavens, then within a very short time you have to do some replanning. And actually the western route didn't have to be rerouted once, but repeatedly, because we could open up sections, shorter sections at intervals, and again that was a major challenge. And we wanted to have a regular operations as soon as possible. And of course, we had to use many buses as replacements. Just imagine how many buses you will need so that a whole train can be accommodated. And that, of course, also costs money. And here I would say that our standard operations were resumed then in December 2024. And this was a kind of a miracle for us before Christmas. So by opening full operations before Christmas, that was the big present for us, the Christmas present for us. And then for the passenger subgroup, there were also additional costs due to maintenance. As you know, we had some delays in the delivery of new trains, so all the train fleets were in operation for a longer period of time. And perhaps you saw some very old trains and actually city trains that were running on lines. And you may know that we have our city jets, and now these are also coming towards the 10th year of their operations, which isn't very much for the life of a train, but nevertheless, maintenance goes up, and this means that costs will go up. And this had an impact on the overall result. Rail cargo also faced a very challenging year and managed a very challenging year due to the economic downturn as well. If you remember, up to the middle of 2024, the forecasts were such that you could expect some upswing of the economy. And up to June of 2024, we were more or less online with our forecast. But as of July, the quantities reduced and dropped considerably. We could eventually have a very good volume, a quantity result at the end, and we are quite proud of that. But this was not enough. On top of that, we did not succeed in having a positive result because of the flood, which I'm also showing you here in this chart. And we also need to underline that rail cargo was affected not only in Austria, but throughout Europe. Just remember that there were the Annette storms. Many trains could not run because of the storms, and that, of course, also had a major impact on the result. On top of that, there are construction sites, and construction sites don't help cargo traffic, especially if routes have to be closed completely. And that's what's happening in Germany now, that they are closing routes altogether. If you have the passenger traffic and passenger transport, you can put them into buses, but you cannot put the cargo onto buses. And accordingly, what we can see that 2025, with this combination of conditions, will not be easier than 2024. I suppose that I do not expect that we have a flood like in 2024, but for rail cargo, the broad gap between the diesel prices and energy prices is quite disadvantageous, and we have major capacities. Overcapacities actually for the trucks because of the low performance, economic performance. So we have an overcapacity of trucks, and then the network charges will go up in Germany. So this will be a difficult year for rail cargo. Nevertheless, the mobility transition will happen, will come about, and for that we need the cargo operations. This is why we invest into this subgroup concerning the multimodal mix, and we also want to exploit the multimodal mix for transport as much as possible. And with that, we will also maintain our position on the market as number 2 as a cargo operator in Europe. Infrastructure, here we have a very stable result. Of course, infrastructure was affected by the flood as well. I said before Christmas, we had this minor miracle that we could reopen all the lines, working hard to achieve that, of course. But not all spare parts were available, were not delivered in time. Tracks is something that you don't hold in store in large quantities. They had to be produced separately, and for that, between May and June, we'll have to close down some of the routes in order to finalize our repair work. It was the best result that we could achieve by doing this in two sections, and we're using this opportunity to install also further flood protection measures. So much about the various subgroups, and with that I will move on and give you an overall outlook of the group as a whole. You see here the revenues and the material expenses, and you see here that revenues and expenses increased by the same rate, that is to say 15%, with total expenditures. It's exactly those subjects that come into play here. So there is an expansion of the passenger traffic, so a slight plus, also with rail cargo, and the infrastructure comes there on top. You don't see that in the result, but I will mention it again when we talk about investments. We have the largest construction site in the recent ABB history, and that is also reflected in our growth. As far as material expenses are concerned, here you have in particular the materials that had to be bought for the floods. If the tracks have to be maintained or have to be reconstructed, that's actually what we need to say here. And if tunnels need to be refurbished and train stations, you may remember the picture of the train station that is flooded completely, and the train station in Unternbach. If that is to be used again, then of course this will increase the use of material. And of course services need to be expanded, and more energy is needed for that. And staff expenses have risen, as was said before by Andreas. We have an increase in altogether in the staff numbers, so 2,500 persons more than the year before, and we also had salary increases due to the collective bargaining.
All the investments we make, and I will mention them a bit later on, they are reflected in the profit and loss statement. Depreciation and amortization will increase hand in hand with increased investments. Well, investments also cost a lot of money. For this reason, we require more funding to finance all our activities, and we also have to pay interests on the monies and loans. And with the financial liabilities increase and multiplied with the interest rate, we see a larger minus in front of the result. But all in all, across all items, you see a very stable result. And we can actually be very proud of that. And I have already mentioned it quite frequently. Investments are a key issue. And here you see the ramp up in the chart. 2024, we have reached a peak of our investment program. The dark gray section is our framework program. So 2024 to 2025, this is 3.2 billion. But on top of that, we have additional investment, including into our fleet. So it is quite easy to guess the major drivers of the framework plan investments, and these are our 3 tunnel projects. And in 2024, we really achieved major, I would even call them historic milestones. We completed construction of Koralmbahn, and now the tests are ongoing, training activities are ongoing, but as of timetable 25-26, we will open Koralmbahn. And since the press has often asked question whether freight transport can also use Koralmbahn, and I can assure you, even from October on, freight transport will be passing through our Koralmbahn tunnel. And here on the Semmering Basis Tunnel, and you saw that in the video, this is very, very emotional. In November, we celebrated the breakthrough. So this is a historic event. Twice 27 kilometers of tube have been dug, and 1,000 kilometers of cable and wires, and 55,000 kilometers of 55 kilometers of tracks will have to be installed, and then it will become operational. And we continued with the Brenner Base Tunnel, and according to plan, we will have the breakthrough of the exploratory gallery connection between Austria and Italy. And once we have that, then we will know precisely how the geological situation will look like, and this will open the path for the largest underground railway connection in the world. And I hope that next year, when we meet again, I will be able to announce that we will be celebrating the final breakthrough in 2026, and then this does not only, well, this brings us to our existing railway network, including modernizing of railway stations. One of the largest projects is in the city of Vienna, the upgrade of the S-Bahn, suburban train. Many of you might have experienced the closing of the road, Westbahn to Praterstein. This summer there will be another closure, and this is 13 kilometers across Vienna. We are renovating and refurbishing supports, and then this will be equipped with the most modern cutting-edge equipment. We are also extending the platform to make sure that our double-decker trains can stop there. And we also have to invest into digitalization, including the European Train Tool System, so that we can really go on this route in line with our frequencies and intervals. The Tauern Tunnel is being another major point of investment. It has been up there for 150 years. 800 kilometers are being refurbished because there was some water seepage, and we are also widening the tunnel and refurbishing Bad Gastein, Hofgastein and Bad Dorfgastein, which are being modernized and made fit for the future. On top of that, we are also pushing our electrification program, the first stage. Andreas Mattei addressed that before. The Graz-Köflach-Bahn infrastructure has been integrated into our ÖBB infrastructure, and the first stage of our electrification program with the HKB has been completed. On top of that, we are also working on the Mattigtalbahn in Upper Austria and in Lower Austria at the Treisentalbahn in order to electrify these routes again, and we will at the same time be able to make park and ride facilities operational along the route. When it comes to electrification, we have to focus on traction currency. We are working towards becoming more independent. So Oberfellach, the hydropower plant, was made operational in 2024. Another hydropower plant is being currently under construction, and we make a photovoltaic facility operational. It means that we can increase our independence when it comes to traction current and electricity. So much about infrastructure investment, about the fleet investment for 2024 and 2024. We integrated 30 trains into our fleet, 8 Railjets. You might have used them, 16 excellent night jets with the mini cabins I can highly recommend. And we also introduced 16 city jets into the local transport fleet. And this brings me again back to investment, digitalization. This is very important if we want to increase the intervals, or also the intervals underground trains on the main section. But we also invest a lot into safety and security, digitalization of the network. 2024 main corridors towards Slovakia, Marek and Kitzé, they were integrated in the European system in order to have a seamless connection to our neighboring countries. And these excellent investments, but they are also reflected in our balance sheet, our assets on the positive side. This is investment of 36.4 investment, and this increased to 39.6 investments. Well, and the same line, our net indebtedness increases, but our equity ratio is very, very stable. Here you see the stable development, equity and equity ratio very stable. And we can really say that we have a very healthy balance sheet, very sound performance, and on top of that, we saved 4.2 million CO2 based on our business model and our investment. And with this healthy balance sheet and this healthy performance, we even do good things for the climate, which enables us to invest further and look into the future. And this brings me back to you, Andreas. And before coming to the end, I would like to look from 2024 into the future. So looking into the future, what does that mean? We are investing more than 6 billion euros into new trains. On the very right-hand side, you see what we will include into our fleet based on today's plan. In 2026, the rail jets of the new generation, for new, the first 6 double-decker rail jets, more than 40 double-decker city jets will be integrated into our fleet, 47, and more than 50 city deck vehicles for interregional transport and, so to speak, normal short-distance transport. Well, all in all, more than 120 trains. Why do we do that? As of December 2025, we will take a major leap in terms of transport. Vorarlberg will be opened, 130 kilometers of additional tracks. There will be an increase in long-distance transport of some 30%. And here you can see the chart here. That you see that when it comes to travelers, we see an even higher increase, 27% compared to population increase of 8%. So these investments take effect, both at the level of infrastructure and at the level of our fleets. And I have already mentioned that Vorarlberg, so this will create a new reality of life for people living along this track, the railway. This is a direct connection between Graz and Klagenfurt. You can cover this section within 45 minutes, and this will really make a change. And in the international context on the Baltic-Adriatic corridor, it is a key element, thus modernizing this corridor, and access preparatory work is running full steam this year. This doesn't only mean new trains, but even more personnel. So we are hiring new people in order to make sure that this 30% increase can be managed in our long-distance transport services, because we do not only have a doubling of the long-distance trains on the Vorarlberg section, but in parallel, we will also fleet in the interregio transport with the new train material, which in terms of technology is similar to a short-distance transport system. We will also have a first class, and we have Pyhrn, Elster, Older, Südbahn section, in order to make sure that we have a most attractive offer for the people who live there in these regions. And we all are preparing the ground for that, so that as of 14 December 2025, we can enter into the new decade of transport. And we believe that we can expect a further increase in passenger figures. So we're really looking forward to that. Several records which nevertheless led to a very stable result. And we would like to thank you, and we are available for questions.